Welcome to the Bible Forum. It's the second Sunday in August. I'm Warren Sprouse. Biblical prophecy has been in the news this week, and just about every turn in the road. There are a number of different articles that came out that all pointed to the same thing. I've kind of put them all together to look at the biblical prophecy as it concerns the Middle East. Today, all ears are on Iran. She has just seized another Iraqi ship in the Persian Gulf. This is the third vessel we know of that's been commandeered by Tehran in recent weeks. According to reports, naval forces of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard seized an Iraqi oil tanker under the pretense that the ship was carrying illicit cargo. The Revolutionary Guard statement quoted by the state news agency IRNA declared that their personnel had seized this ship around Farsi Island, and it was carrying around 700,000 liters of smuggled fuel. 7 foreign crew members were arrested during the operation. That seizure would be the latest in a series of seizures in the last few months. The question is being asked in public: are the UN envoys and Egyptians just stupid, or what? The same Hamas and Islamic Jihad leaders who are telling the Egyptians and the UN envoys that they are keen on maintaining the ceasefire understandings with Israel are also begging Iran for the resources to step up their attacks on Israel. And yet the Egyptians and the UN envoys prefer not to see this double dealing. If and when the next war erupts in the Gaza Strip, the mediators will not be able to say they were surprised. All these mediators have done, or have to do now, is to turn half an ear to what the leaders of Hamas and Islamic Jihad and their patrons in Tehran are saying, to understand that Gaza-based groups are dead set on inflicting as much damage on Israel as possible. While Hamas and Islamic Jihad are talking to Egyptians and UN envoys about a ceasefire with Israel, the leaders of these two groups are also continuing to seek financial and military support from Iran to prepare for war. Islamic Jihad's latest threats coincide with statements by the group's leaders that Israel had better abide by the terms of the ceasefire understandings reached earlier this year with the Gaza-based factions, or there's going to be a problem. On the one hand, Islamic Jihad wants Israel to commit to these understandings. On the other hand, the group is saying that it is continuing to manufacture and upgrade new types of weapons that will be used to attack Israel. It seems logical then that for Islamic Jihad and Hamas, the ceasefire understandings reached under the auspices of Egypt and the UN are meant to give the Gaza-based groups a chance to continue building their military capabilities, and to do all of this without having to worry about Israeli retaliatory measures. And this is news? This is the way it's been for the last 50 years or more. Here's some news about Turkey, right out of the Bible. The nation of Turkey has for years been in the common market and been considered a Western ally. But today, an anti-Islamist, Kemalist Turkish general was the first to suggest that Turkey should align its foreign policy with the rising powers of Eurasia. That's all of Europe plus Asia. No, that was 17 years ago. 8 months before President Erdogan's Justice and Development Party first came to power. Since then, he has remained undefeated. Turkey has been a member of an organization they want to destroy. The U.S. at the time was busy with the final touches on the military operation that would oust Iraq's dictator Saddam Hussein in 2003. This general, powerful Secretary General of Turkey's National Security Council, said that Turkey should seek an alternative alliance with Russia and Iran. In November of 2002, Erdogan's party came to power, pledging to pursue a pro-EU, pro-West liberal governance, and wrongly accused Kemalist ideology of being an obstacle against liberal democracy. An incredible political story, looking back over the last 17 years. How gullible we are. Few observers back then could have known that Erdogan's pro-West orientation was a fake, and that his deep adherence to political Islam, an enemy of the Western civilization, would one day urge him to seek non-Western alliances. Few observers, anybody who can read a Bible, was telling them that's the way this works. It was no coincidence that in 2009 the Turkish military became the first NATO force to have joint military drills with the Syrian army. In 2010, Turkey became the first NATO member state to have exercises with China's Air Force. In 2013, Turkey selected a Chinese company to receive a multi-billion-dollar contract for the production of its first long-range air and anti-missile defense system, a decision Ankara later scrapped. And still, the West has acted as though Turkey was an ally. But some did know. There were Bible students who read and understood the end-time scenarios that placed Turkey squarely in the center of tribulation events. Events that would bring Jesus back to earth in order to stop the carnage before Israel is totally destroyed. Erdogan's decision to deploy the Russian S-400 surface-to-air missile system in Turkish NATO territory reflects this ideological anti-Western thought process. So does his 2013 demand that Russian President Vladimir Putin be a SEAL at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a Eurasian would-be replica of NATO. Turkey became the first NATO member state to become a dialogue partner with the regional body colloquially known as the Shanghai Five, April 2013. The SCO's members include Russia, China, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. And Turkey's choice of a Russian-made air defense system, primarily designated to hit NATO aerial assets, is a reflection of its anticipation of an aerial military conflict with NATO member states in the future. Now, the Bible predicts a time when powerful forces from the north, from the east, and from the south of Israel will make a concerted effort to wipe Israel from the earth. Now, each of these nations will have different reasons, but they will share the same goals. Turkey, aligned with Russia, will be angling for a different reason than will the Arab alliances from the east. And Egypt, moving in from the south, appears simply opportunistic. That is in the Bible. But the end result will be the same: get rid of Israel. Here in the United States, we now have a president who is not exactly aligned with God in his soul, in his spirit, in his behavior, at least in any spiritual sense. And yet he is doing more, has done more, in a far shorter time period than any president these United States has ever seen when it comes to strengthening Israel. Legitimizing Israel. protecting Israel. It is a repudiation of our pseudo-Christian stance as a nation. Why is he doing it and the others did not? Well, the skeptics will point to his daughter and to his son-in-law and to his grandchildren, who today are all Jewish. The grandson or the son-in-law born that way, the wife converting, and the children all being born Jewish. This process is being fulfilled by one who clearly has no spiritual understanding of what he's doing, although he alludes to the fact that he does. This is the stuff of novelists, not politics. Currently, Turkey's westernization has come to a halt. She's still increasingly aligning with the Eurasian bloc, and her foreign policy is starting to reflect this orientation and desire. ProphecyNewsWatch.com is telling us that 7 out of 10 Turks now report feeling threatened by U.S. power, an increase of 28 percentage points just in the last 6 years, a higher jump than in any country recently polled. At the same time, NATO is showing signs of keeping Turkey kind of at bay, at arm's length. And the EU is stalling when it comes to allowing Turkey full access. Negotiations are currently blocked. The deal was that Turkey would keep the mainly Syrian refugees on its soil, preventing them from flooding EU countries. And the EU would grant Turkey visa-free travel rights. All this has definite biblical prophetic implications. And then there's China. China is upping the ante. Does China believe that we are on the verge of a major global crisis? They're acting as though they do. Is that the way we're acting? The Communist Chinese government has always been very big into planning. It appears that they have decided that now is the time to hoard food, hoard gold, and other commodities. Of course, in recent days, the fact that China is completely cutting off U.S. agricultural imports has made headlines all over the globe. But at the same time, China is dramatically increasing the amount of food that it's importing from the rest of the world. The end result is actually a substantial surge in Chinese imports, and it's starting to show up in the official numbers, even as they cut off completely U.S. agricultural imports. For example, we just learned that Chinese soybean imports in July were actually up 8% over last year. They're getting them from Brazil. With China officially pulling out of buying U.S. agricultural products, American farmers are losing one of their biggest customers. It could be a devastating blow in an already tough year for crops and commodity prices. It may also dent U.S. gross domestic product and hurt companies like Deere, whose business is directly tied to farming in the heartland. Pat Westhoff, director of the Food and Agricultural Policy Research Institute at the University of Missouri, says, quote, cutting China completely out of the market would be a very big deal, end of quote. So where has China gone to get their products? Well, she's gone to Russia. China has approved wheat imports from the Russian region of Kurgan, the Chinese Customs Office reported just last Friday, bringing Russia in step closer to its goal of dramatically increasing grain exports. It also approved soybean imports from all parts of Russia, according to the General Administration of Customs, having all but halted U.S. soy imports as the trade dispute between Beijing and Washington deepened. This is yet another sign that Russia and China are drawing closer, and it's something Bible students have been anticipating. Meanwhile, China is also hoarding gold. In fact, July was the 8th month in a row in which the Chinese increased their reserves. Are you hoarding gold? Why not? Makes sense. China also bought nearly 10 tons of gold in July, marking the 8th consecutive month the country increased its reserves. The purchase is another signal from China that it's gearing up for a prolonged trade conflict with the United States. Gold serves as a historic safe haven investment, and its price typically rises when markets and other currencies see increased volatility and prolonged weakness. In addition, Bloomberg is reporting that Chinese commodity purchases of all types were very, very strong in July. Imports of soy to coal and crude oil gained, signaling demand in the world's biggest buyer remains solid even as trade spat with the U.S. escalates. So why are the Chinese suddenly stocking up on everything? Well, the truth is that the answer to that question is obvious. The trade war between the U.S. and China is escalating. The war in the Middle East could erupt at any time. The global economy has been steadily slowing down. Crops are failing all over the planet, and everywhere we look, we seem to be seeing rising political instability, even in China's own backyard. After weeks of unprecedented political protests in Hong Kong, it looks like we could be right on the verge of a brutal crackdown. And China fully expects the U.S. to come to Hong Kong's defense. The New York Post recently stated after 8 weeks of huge Hong Kong street protests against Beijing's rule, the People's Republic is massing police and soldiers just across the border. The message? If the protesters don't quit, a bloodbath is coming. Beijing has also started denouncing the protests as the work of American provocateurs. That's so the regime can paint the Tiananmen Square-style crackdown as a battle against foreign influence, not a smashing of Chinese people who decided all on their own that they'd rather be free. Aside from the sheer brutality of it all, they appear to be doing the wise thing. Now is the time to get prepared for what's coming, because the road ahead promises to be quite tumultuous. Most people don't realize it, but U.S. relations with China have already passed the point of no return. Things are going to become increasingly tense between our two nations. That's going to have a very serious implication for all of us. The summation of this whole issue is that with Europe, with China, with the United States, with the Arab nations, and with Israel, all of this is converging. And if you can read your Bible clearly, you will find that it's all being spelled out right there. Not the details, the large general idea. And why is it that Israel becomes such a focal point at the end? Because Israel is a living representative of God. Israel are characterized in the Bible as God's people, and that God is protecting them. God has always protected them. Even as he judged them for their sin, they were protected. He brought them back to the land, and they are strong. They will be the focal point of the next global war.